Hi guys, my name is Jacob Mao, and I have been a part of the disciple-making community up here in Chicago since about 2008. I met Louie and Ryan during that year, and they kind of extended themselves in friendship and pulled me into that community. So I've been a part of things up here since that time, and since a couple years before that time, I've also been involved in helping to resettle refugees up here on the north side of Chicago. So since about 2006, I've been involved with World Relief, which is the only evangelical organization that works together with the State Department to do kind of the nuts and bolts of resettling refugees on the ground. So when we ask the question, who are refugees, I think it's important that we answer it through the lens of the kingdom that we belong to and not the country that we belong to. When I'm asked, well, who are refugees, Jake, as a person who has worked with them for 10 years, first of all, they're people. They're people who've been given the title of refugee. They don't have that title for their whole lives, and it doesn't define them. And as people, they are human beings who are created by God and created in His image, and who bear His image just as much as you do and as I do. And they are people who are loved by Him with a depth that we will never fully understand. So a refugee is someone who meets the United Nations definition, legal definition of a refugee. And we can put that up somewhere so you can see it in a link along with this video. But it's people basically who are outside of their country of origin and who are unable to return because of violence and persecution for specific reasons. And right now in the world, the figures say that there are more than 60 million displaced people. 20 million of those have the specific status of refugees. And then it's a very, very small percentage of that number that actually gets resettled to a third country like the US or Australia or Canada. And the other categories would be internally displaced people, so they're also uprooted because of violence, but they're still within their country of origin. And then the other category would be asylum seekers who leave and they go to another country without refugee status, and they claim to be accepted there as asylees. And then they wait for that country to determine if they'll be able to stay there or not. And all those categories are also separate from the category of immigrants who go through a different system than the refugee program. Why should people who follow Jesus be involved in refugee issues? And there's a lot of things that could be said about that. I'm going to do a plug here for World Relief's book that came out this summer called Seeking Refuge. And the book does a really good job of laying out a response to that, a lot of the biblical reasons for Christians and for churches to be involved in refugee issues. As people who believe in Jesus, when we engage in refugee issues, when we make the effort to create a sense of home for people who have been displaced and people whose homes have been blown apart, what we're doing bears a really strong spiritual power and a symbolism. You know, when we do that, we're not just doing it in human power, but our actions are symbolizing the home that the Lord invites us into through Jesus. And when we do that, when we engage in that, it bears a really powerful testimony both to the people who are helping and to the world around us who has the opportunity to watch. In disciple making, one of the things that you learn is how to go to the difficult places in someone's life with that person. And I've had that modeled for me in my experiences, where I had friends who came alongside of me through difficult things and through dark places, in my life, and they said, Jake, we're going to stick with you, and we love you. And we're going to go to this hard place because even though it's hard, we believe that the Lord is working there. And that it's often in those places of suffering and hardship that the Lord does His work. And I think that that's the same if you zoom out and you think on a global scale. Where are the places in the world where there is hardship, where there is suffering? And how can we be there? How can we be present at those places? And when we're there, how do we find the Lord moving and the Lord being at work? I think it's an invitation for churches and for Christians that they really need to respond to. And I think that if we don't, we're really missing out not only on our opportunity to share the love of God with people, but also for Him to be a means of grace to us through the people who we will meet who've been through very difficult things. If you are wondering about practical ways, if you're saying, okay, so what are practical things I can do to get involved in refugee issues? The first thing that I would say that I think might be the most valuable right now is to find some way to actually have contact with someone who's come to the U.S. from a refugee background. And I say that because right now especially, sometimes one interaction with another human being can contain more truth than 100 articles or speeches or tweets or Facebook posts or whatever. We talk about it in terms of issues, but it's an issue because it's about people. So that might mean different things. You might be in an area where refugees are being resettled, or you might not. World Relief has offices all over the U.S., and perhaps you could reach out to them, and perhaps they would have a refugee or someone who's on their staff who came originally as a refugee who'd be willing to come and share with you and your group or your church or whoever about their experiences. That would be my number one recommendation. In a practical sense, some people just want to be hands-on and they want to help out and they want to do something. You can also go to World Relief's website, and they have a thing called Welcome Kits, and you can click on it and it'll show you different areas. You can click the office that's closest to you or wherever, and then it'll take you to an Amazon page, and it has all the items listed out that are needed to furnish a refugee's apartment when they first arrive. You can just go and click and buy the stuff on Amazon, and it will ship it to that office, and that really helps the offices have the things that they need to help people right when they first get here. So that would be another thing. And then from an advocacy perspective, we're kind of entering a time where we don't know what will happen. President Trump has the authority to say which refugees we will accept, how many of them, and from which countries. A lot of states have introduced some kind of unfriendly policies or proposals about refugee issues. So there's advocacy that can be done around that. There's a organization called Refugee Council USA that has some pretty good advocacy tools in particular, so I would encourage you to go there and check that out if you're a person who's wired for advocacy. And those would be the three main things that I can think of how you can jump in if you're interested in just practical ways to respond. So in terms of the question of risk, is it a risk or is it a threat for us to be receiving refugees, particularly Muslim ones? There's a couple of things I would say in response to that. One of them is that the dialogue that has happened in the U.S. over the last 18 months, it really kind of put the ideas of security and compassion against each other. Like, we can have one or the other. Either we stay safe and we tighten up our borders and we just say, no, we can't take anyone from there, at the expense of being compassionate. Or we're compassionate and we open our arms and we say, hey, we'll take all these people into our country at the expense of our security. And The only thing I can really say about that is just don't take for granted that those are the only two options. Don't take it for granted that we can't maintain security and also be compassionate and kind of extend our arms to people whose lives have been torn apart. We can't do both of those, I think, at the same time, or at least we can't assume that we cannot do that.